Hello, welcome to another episode of Namtaro Talks. Today's topic is a pretty interesting title. The premise of it is just guys hanging out with each other. Honestly, there's no other way that I could have really worded this. And once again, this was another topic that kind of came out of the blue. It was also influenced by two movies that I recently watched. Dead Poet Society, starring Robin Williams and Ethan Hawke, and The Outsiders, based on the book by S.E. Hilton. And it starred a whole bunch of young up-and-coming stars at the time, like Patrick Swayze, Ralph Macchio, even Tom Cruise. Yeah, but the episode is not really about those two specific movies. And you can kind of already infer that the main, not really main, but a common theme with those movies is it's just a bunch of guys just hanging around each other and talking. It wasn't really something I given much thought to begin with. Two things that kind of triggered this idea. I looked at my current social circle, and I was fortunate to, I guess, maintain good relationships with friends and peers from the past at different points and stages in my life. Whether it be high school, or I guess middle school also, undergrad, grad school, even at the current time. However, I never really had a group of guys that I would always hang out with on a regular basis. I was never in a fraternity. I am not a frat boy. I was in various social clubs back then, participated in their events. I don't have like a group of 3 to 5 or 4 to 6 guys that I hang out with or talk to or confide in or meet up with on a regular basis. I'm not in a major chat group with anyone. I guess a not very good example is, in Family Guy, Peter hangs out with Joe Quagmire in Cleveland. I don't really have that. And that's not the best example, but there's just something to be said about just a bunch of guys hanging out with each other and just talking and catching up. And there's a stereotype that guys don't really talk that much with each other, and they don't really share feelings, and they just make fun of each other, or they just sit there and do the same activity, whether it be watching a game or playing a video game. But there's a sense of camaraderie or brotherhood with just guys being around each other, The reason I guess this topic came to mind was in the current culture, there's a term called toxic masculinity. Oh, when a bunch of guys get together, they do bad things or they talk about bad things that are harmful to society, and it becomes an old boys club eventually. Like, it doesn't have to be like that. There's like girls' night out and stuff, and girls have sleepovers. I'm not saying everything has to be co-ed, like guys and girls. Everything has to be integrated. Like, sometimes everyone needs their own space. Like, females do their own thing, males do their own thing. Then they meet up and integrate into society and do their things together. And I used to be in Scouts. That's something that I don't disclose too often, but it was Boy Scouts. So a bunch of guys hanging out with each other. So the unique thing about our troop was that it's a collective troop. So there are Boy Scouts here, Girl Scouts there, the Venturers who are slightly older, and that one's co-ed with boys and girls. And of course, the younger boys would be Cub Scouts, and the younger girls would be Junior Girl Scouts or Brownies, who are even younger than that. It was all separate and distinct, which was totally fine, because like boys interact with each other differently than when they're by themselves than when they are around girls, or when they're around adults, or around someone older, or around someone younger. Every group and every demographic, that's the case. You interact differently. It makes you a bit more, I don't know about open, but maybe a bit more yourself. You talk about things, or you say things, or you discuss certain themes, or engage in certain activities that you typically can't do with other demographics. I'm not saying it has to be exclusive, but it's just a time and space. It's not like I'm a lone wolf or a hermit. I mean, I had groups of guy friends in the past too, and it was cool. We played basketball together. We go to the mall sometimes. We play Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic the Gathering. Unfortunately, I couldn't play as many video games because I didn't really have the game systems. I honestly didn't really like it. I wasn't good at first-person shooters. Like, all the guys played Halo. I sucked at Halo and Counter-Strike. And at one point, a lot of them played Maple Story or League of Legends. I tried my hand at those, but I'm just not interested. Another thing about groups of guys, like, you think there's some kind of like common bond or common activity or common in-group, but over time, preferences change. The thing that you solely bond over, it didn't seem as fun anymore. Have different priorities and interests over time, and that's okay. That's the thing. A friendship, it should be more than just that single activity or that single moment in time that you bonded over. Not that it shouldn't be, but determines the nature of the friendship. Sometimes you're just with someone for that specific time or situation or activity in your life. And once it's gone, and that's fine. Back to middle school, it was cool. Yeah, and I guess it led into high school because we played basketball, and after a while, you hang around those guys long enough, you kind of figure out their different personalities and idiosyncrasies of what they talk, which their demeanor is like, what their interests are, what their skill set is, what their style is, what their preferences are. And of course, the nature of it, some guys are closer to other guys in the group. Sometimes you bond over certain things more than others, or some people just relate to one another more. But that's okay, because at the end of the day, you had that group. And honestly, some groups reunite, some don't, but you had that memory, that moment in time. Well, I'm gonna start talking about the movies. And once again, here's another spoiler alert. If you intend to watch The Dead Poet Society or read or watch The Outsiders in the future, you can take a break here. Yeah, The Dead Poet Society, that was on my movie list for a while, and I finally buckled down and watched it. Not that it was a chore or anything, it was a really good movie. So the premise is that it's at an all-boys Catholic school where they're pretty conservative and traditional, but then there's this new English teacher played by Robin Williams who makes the boys, I guess, learn to express themselves and be free with their thinking and use the English language, especially through poetry, to convey their thoughts and feelings better. But it wasn't in a preachy way or a dorky way. It was a relatively relatable way. Honestly, I don't remember all of the names of all the characters, but of course there's the timid guy, and there's the guy who's controlled by his father, and there's the guy who's trying to impress a girl, and there's kind of the rebel guy, and the guy who was a bit wary of the English teacher. And of course, what's going on with how the English teacher influences these guys, it's gradual. It wasn't overt. He wasn't trying to push a agenda or anything. He was just being himself. He was just trying to express a different perspective. I mean, they literally climbed onto a table just to get a different perspective. But yeah, I mean, you can't be super stuffy and always follow the rules. But it's not like you should break the rules either. You just have to follow the rules in your own way, but still be yourself. Yeah, so the guys found out that the Robin Williams teacher was part of the Dead Poet Society, where it's literally just a bunch of guys who huddle up in the cave and just read poetry to each other, but either read from old stuff or make up new stuff, and they express themselves, and they talk, they laugh, they chant, they light fires, they smoke. And the nature of the Dead Poet Society, I mean, they gotta hike a couple of miles to meet in the cave. I mean, it didn't really feel super exclusive, but just being part of something, just be part of the in-group. And of course, the more assertive guy invited the shy guy to attend and allowed him to be in the background and be the scribe. And the English teacher got the shy guy to express himself a bit more, even encouraged him to come up with a poem right on the spot. Mind you, the Dead Poet Society at the present moment in the movie, it was the boys. Like, the English teacher didn't lead them or anything. But it was a heartwarming movie because it goes through different phases of development. Like how some guys learn to open up and come out of their shell. Some guys learn how to evaluate situations and different social dynamics. And you learn to be bold, but not recklessly bold. And sometimes it's just a matter of trying and doing it just to check it out, just to know that you were able to do so, just to see how good you are at it. Whether it was the guy who asked the girl out or read poetry to her, or the guy who went on a limb and went against his father's orders and participated in the play. It's like a testimony of the human spirit of anything. Like, we are meant to be free, we are meant to express, we are meant to learn, and we are meant to be social. And similar things probably could have been done with girls too, Though at one of the Dead Poet Society's club meetings, one guy brought a couple of ladies to the club. Though the dynamic slightly shifted, they were cool with it. Of course, the ladies didn't really join the club. Well, the movie was in the 1950s, and of course it was a different time. It was more wholesome, and without the internet and smartphones and whatnot, you had to interact with each other. You had to form in-person, personal human bonds. Not to mention the teacher-student experience. Yeah, at this point, you already know I'm spoiling the movie, but after the administration came down on the Robin Williams English teacher. Yeah, I keep saying Robin Williams, but he just stood out, you know. Yeah, you see him as Miss Doubtfire and the Genie. Several of the boys who were influenced by the English teacher, they did one last act of not really defiance, but expression to show the teacher that the teacher got through to them. But yeah, Dead Poet Society, I highly recommend it. I lament that they don't make movies like that anymore. I mean, it doesn't seem like a super expensive movie to take. There wasn't a bunch of big blockbuster names, or maybe up and coming. But of course, Robin Williams, I think he was relatively prominent, but he wasn't like a big superstar yet. Same goes for Ethan Hawke. He was like a teenager at the time. But yeah, there were no crazy CGI or special effects or big budget studios or a bunch of reshoots or anything. Or you gotta make hundreds of billions of dollars to break even. It was a manageable concept, enjoyable story, good characters. I mean, what else can you ask for in a movie, you know? Same goes for The Outsiders. I read The Outsiders in, was it high school or middle school? I forgot. Well, probably middle school, because I remember it was an easy read. But I reread it again several years later as an adult. And once again, it's a bunch of guys. Of course, it starts with three brothers. And for this one, I actually remember the characters' names well because the names stand out. There's Ponyboy, who's the main character, and his brothers are Soda Pop and Danny. And the situation is that they are orphans, so Danny's the oldest. Whoops, quick addendum. His name was Derry, not Danny. And of course, other characters such as 2-Bit, Steve, Johnny, Dallas, and each of them had their own role, had their own dynamic, had a different background. They're all at slightly different ages, slightly different backgrounds, definitely different personalities, but the whole dynamic, they all like blend in together. Of course, their group is called the Greasers, and the Greasers is not just them. It was like a bunch of kids from the, I guess, a less privileged side of town, but they are at odds with the Socs, who are on the richer side of town, who are more clean cut and I guess academically better and more affluent. And of course, they harass each other back and forth just because they're different. Yeah, similar to West Side Story. Yeah, it gave me a West Side Story vibes. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to summarize the entire story here or go into what every single character does. But there's like brother relationships. Of course, Ponyboy is the youngest, but there's what it feels like to be the middle child and the oldest child, and being responsible or having to drop out of school or having to work or missing out on opportunities, but living with the choices that you made. There were the simple-minded guys or the deeper, brainier, more feelings guys. There are the rebels. There was the humor guy. There's the more sensitive guy. And it dealt with many themes too, like loss, fear, being trapped, being stuck in your environment, being labeled as a certain something in society, breaking stereotypes, being open-minded, communicating, and ooh, spoiler alert, oh, there's violence and murder too. Okay, not really murder, maybe manslaughter. Yeah, but the deaths, they weren't like random. They had a different good placements in the story. There's the feeling of being lost or trapped or panicking or going to questionable sources for advice. I think this took place in the 50s also. These two guy stories take place in the 50s. I don't know what decade Outsiders was. But once again, without internet and smartphones, you have to bond with each other. And if you go out on the lam or you hide somewhere, you're going to be pretty bored. So all they had to do was like smoke and play cards and read Gone with the Wind and look at sunsets. But once again, it's a coming of age story. I believe the word is a Bildungsroman. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. I'm not an English major. But yeah, the story talks about empty victories, or what happens if you don't really stop to smell the roses, if you don't really have a broader perspective, think there's more to life than something, if you're just hedonistic or chasing cheap thrills, if you have no structure or no love in your life. Like one character had a unfortunate end, and another character lamented that if he had more love, more bonds, would he have had more depth? Would he have been more thoughtful or introspective and appreciate certain things in life that people took for granted or just passed by. It even touches on the themes of life and death. One character, at one moment, he many times he's thought about, yeah, the trigger warning. He thought about killing himself, but then after a certain situation, he realized his life is so short and there was so much he hasn't done yet. Yeah, I don't know why I put a trigger warning there. I guess this day and age, I don't want to really upset or offend people or turn them off, but these are mature themes and they are a part of life. So yes, there is talk of suicide and death in The Outsiders and in many other books and stories and works. Yeah, it's not always wholesome, Disney, whatever, but it's a simple story. Honestly, the author, I might be wrong, but she wrote the book when she was 19. And watching the movie, I kind of already know what was going to happen, but they adapted it very well. It was directed by Francis Ford Coppola, the guy who directed the Godfather movies. But tying it back to the guys, okay, so they hang out at Pony Dairy and Soda Pop's house often because they were all from like broken homes and broken families. Other guys' home situation aren't the best, but they joke with each other, they kind of roughhouse with each other. They smoke together. I mean, I'm sure they fight with each other, but I didn't really see it in the movie. But they fight as a group, as a team. And there was like a huge rumble against the Socias. That's the thing about back then. There's honor, like rumbles are done with honor. So they say, these are the rules, or no fighting before the rumble, or no weapons. Well, you know that bad things happen when the weapons comes out and someone cheats. Yeah, but it was just pretty much MMA fighting, like punching, kicking, wrestling, throwing guys to the ground. But it's two sides and you're fighting with your quote-unquote brothers. But yeah, it was a simple yet deep coming-of-age stories told through, well, one main character being Ponyboy, but with the cast of a bunch of other guys in his life. I mean, there were a couple of females in the book too, and they do play important roles, but it was mainly from the perspective of Ponyboy and his guy friends and his brothers. Alright, that is enough about the movies. But another source of guys hanging out with each other? Bachelor Party. I've only been to two, and one of them was my own. But I guess it depends on the kind of guys that you hang out with. Some guys are crazy and they go to Vegas and do the shenanigans there. Some guys are a bit nerdier and they spend their bachelor party playing board games or video games. I heard about those too. For us, it was chill. Like, the ones I went to, we played basketball, we go out to eat, we cook food at home, we watch MMA fights or movies, or if you're at that age, you just hang around and talk and catch up, because nowadays there's not as many opportunities to do that. But it's just guys relating to each other and bouncing off ideas. Pretty chill, You don't really expect anything. Of course, there needs to be a bit of organization and planning, but you do it to the best of your extent. But yeah, there's just something to be said about guys hanging out with each other. Because sometimes you hang out collectively as a big group, or sometimes but in that group, there's a couple of people that you bond with more, connect with more, or are closer with, and that's fine. And doesn't take away from the other people in that group. Like in the Dead Poet Society, two of the guys were roommates. You know, the quiet guy and the assertive guy who acted in the play, and of course in The Outsiders, Ponyboy and Soda Pop, they were closer as brothers as opposed to Derry, because he was the older authority figure. And of course, Ponyboy and Johnny. I was about to say Ralph, because played by Ralph Macchio, the Karate Kid. But yeah, their demeanor is similar. They're closer in age. I mean, if you're in a similar stage in life or demographic, there's only so much that you can learn and teach each other. I wouldn't say it's like the blind leading the blind, but it's like you grow together. You bounce off ideas, you see what other situations someone else has been, and you try to learn from each other. And even those little age differences, it does make a difference. But yes, guys, they need their own time and space and groups to hang out with each other, like their own safe space, their own third place. Because the psychology and social expectations of males and females are different. You can't expect males to be females and females to be males. But we blend together. It's like a salad, It goes well together. I mean, you can't expect the dressing to be the lettuce, and then there's tomatoes, and but the tomato can't be like the crouton. But you put it all together and you mix it, and it works out to it somehow. But it's not like making a soup where everything blends together. It's separate ingredients that just work together. Yeah, because with guys, there's some mentorship, there's some brotherhood, there's some shared experiences, and you learn a lot about how different personality types, different backgrounds, where you fit, where you stand, how you guys are similar, how you're different, and what makes those differences okay. And not all guy groups are perfect. Of course, there's some drama, there's some fighting that's expected, and there are those in like female groups also. As long as it doesn't get dangerous, like too much group think or following the same bad idea, or being reckless, or hurting yourselves or hurting each other, or peer pressure, or hazing, or having warped definitions of what it means to be a man. Like the masculinity of those guy groups, it should be foundational, stoic, like knowing when to be soft and knowing when to be hard, knowing how to lead, but also knowing when to follow, and also figuring out your role and what you have to offer, what you have to contribute, and what you can learn from. Honestly, it was a bit refreshing to see those two movies. It's just there's this very simple premise, just guys hanging out with each other. It's something that we took for granted, or it could be looked down upon now in society, but there's just something to be said about it. I mean, people have done it for decades or centuries before. Why is it toxic now? Why is it a bad thing now? But of course, you don't let it get out of control. You don't let it become too harmful or self-destructive or bad decisions that alter one's life. But there is a lot more good that can come from it. Well, I know it was a weird title, groups of guys hanging out with each other or something like that. Once again, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye.